And you don't want your phone calculator because you can't use your phone on the exams and quizzes. And when you go to use your phone, or when you go to use your regular calculator on the quiz and exam, and you haven't practiced it, you won't know how to do the keystroking. Today is real important about keystroking. Today we're getting you ready for the 151 class or the 142 class. Is everybody going into one of those maybe?
Yes.
Okay, so you need to know some special keys on your machine. We're going to be using these special keys from now until May, logarithm keys, and we're going into some heavy stuff that you're going to have to know how to play with and what they mean. So to help you on the keys that we're going to use today, you know that inverse is the same as like the word opposite. So if I say, what's the opposite of adding two numbers, what would you say? Subtracting, right? Because we could write this as 7 minus 3, and do you see how I get back to the 4 that I started with in the add problem? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, what's the opposite of multiplying two numbers?
Divided.
Divide, right? So if I say what is 4 times 3 equals 12, I could take 12 divided by 3, and do you see how I start back with my beginning number 4? Yes? Okay, now what's the opposite? We've been squaring numbers, right? X squared, we've been dealing with squaring numbers. What's the opposite of squaring numbers?
Square root.
Square root. Now look at your calculator and find the square root key. It's a symbol on your machine. So I want you to take the square root of 16 on your calculator and tell me what it is. What is it?
4.
4. Because square rooting, this little, it looks like a division sign, but it's got a tail on it. It's called square rooting, and what you're asking the person doing this problem is you're saying, what number times itself gave you 16? Now the answer is 4, right? 4 times 4 is 16. But what you have to learn now is some special keystroking, so now pay attention. All right, we have what we call the positive square root, or it's also called the principal square root. And when you want the positive square root or the principal square root, we use that division bar with the tail on it. If you want the negative square root, you got to put a little slash in front of it. So if I ask you, what is the square root of 36? I'm asking you for the positive number times itself gives you 36. You got it? Yes? Talk to me. If I want to know what negative number times itself gives you 36, I've got to write the math problem this way. And what's my answer?
-6.
Neg 6, right? Because -6 times -6 gives me a positive 36 also. Do you agree? All right. So what we do is we've got to learn some terminology. The whole division sign with that tail on it is called a radical. That's the word you need to learn, and we're going to be playing with radicals from now until the end of the semester. So this is called the radical. What's inside? The number inside here, it says 36. It has a special name, and we call that the radicand. Now, when there's a number outside, we call that the index. I'm asking you how many of the same numbers times itself 3 times gives you an 8. It's called an index. Now, we're sort of lazy. If there is no number raised inside that little division tail there, it's an assumed 2. It's called the square root. Am I telling you anything you don't already know?
I didn't know that.
Okay. All right, now I need you guys all to take your calculators and I want you to do the cube root of 8 and have the calculator say 2. Try it. Cube root of 8. I want you to do this problem on your calculator, and if you don't know how, you need to talk to your new neighbors that you're sitting next to, or raise your hand and I'll try to help you on your machine.
That's, yeah.
Everybody in the front row, okay? Okay, you gotta,
Thank you.
okay, you gotta put the phone away though, because we don't want the phones out in class. Do you have a calculator?
A little
You
more
forgot your
likely to run
backpack.
Doom than
Good
TI
gracious,
84.
it's good teeth in your teeth or in your mouth, or we forget those too. Yeah. Okay, everybody else have calculators? Yes. Yes, some of you don't have a cube option or a cube key.
'Cause they've been
Now
getting
watch.
used
What you will have on your calculator is this symbol right there somewhere, or it's an X to a Y. It's gonna be 2 letters with that radical sign. Now, when you have this little symbol, it's usually a second function on your calculator. But in order for the calculator to understand the index, you've got to type in your 3 first. Then you're going to hit the end of the radical X or whatever that symbol is. And then you're gonna put in your 8, and then you press enter. Mhm.
I don't have that option.
Okay? Raise your hand if you still don't know how to do cube root of 8. Okay, you should have a cube root somewhere in your machine. Here. Right here is yours. You see the X to the Y key? You have to hit the green key. So what you're gonna do is plug in a 3 first. Do the 3, the index. Now hit your second and your, is that, it'd be this key right here. And then
So,
put in your 8.
Mine,
Press
we've got
enter.
one for just square roots, and then
Not it.
one that
So,
is
Is
to add a
this
radican.
the-
You see that?
Yeah, I don't have that.
these
But
are
I don't
up,
see that.
Bet you
up,
do.
up.
See, it would probably be in the same area.
This is your
Okay.
up. Okay. All right, so clear it, that's not right. So let's do a second
See
in
if I
that
can-
key first.
See if I can look it up before she helps.
Okay, now put in your
TI 84
3,
plus?
and then put in your 8. I don't think that's right either. Anybody have a TI 30?
Yeah.
TI
Is yours
84
working?
plus
Okay, explain to her
square
how to
root
do
of
it.
radicand.
I don't have the option to choose.
Yes, you do. This is your square root one. Your math might be it. There's your math. It's underneath math. The answer is 2. You have the TI 32 and I couldn't get hers to work. Do you have the TI, does yours work?
I did 3 and the second line, and then I put the 8, and then it's slightly
Yeah. Look at the direction. Anybody else have a TI 30 that works? Did yours work?
Yeah, mine worked, but our calculators are different.
Oh, he's got a TI 30 there too. His doesn't work. You have a TI 30, it doesn't work. It does work, I just have to read your directions. When I used to teach this in Illinois, we used to make all of our students get a TI 82. So that my lesson was like, okay, everybody's going to do this. Now I could spend the next hour and 15 minutes going through everybody's computer. So if you cannot do this problem, don't leave here until you can. That's the whole idea. If you don't have your calculator here, we can't test what your knowledge is.
I gotta get it.
Are you okay?
This is my next
You're
one.
You're doing math. Yours is a math. Oh,
I went to
oh,
mine.
TI. Okay, oh yeah, go ahead, press enter. Should
And then what, it just lets you put the number in first?
You're doing
Okay,
Q
cause mine has two different functions for it. So we probably just write two.
I used to hate that, bro.
It's back in
Where's the Y?
It's great.
Where's the X to the Y? And you- Oh, here, you have math. Oh, yours is right there, math.
But you had to add the radical, that's
Go
the,
ahead. Right
that's the
here.
other function for me.
So it's kind of backwards, so if we wanted to.
So that's just square roots.
We have
And that one adds a radical.
Okay. So but you will use shift ultimately, right?
Yeah, anything in gold,
Oh,
press shift,
good.
anything in red, press alpha.
Gotcha.
Okay. Do you see what a mess it is? Unless you bring your calculators in. I'm telling you, as we progress through the rest of this class where we get into logs and natural logs, we're gonna use a lot of weird keys on this machine that you bought that so far all we've done is add, subtract, multiply, divide. You have to bring your calculators to class so we can make sure you know how to do the keystroking. Testing a really easy math problem to see if you're doing the right keystroking is imperative. You gotta do it when you go home. If you don't have your calculator, you try this and see if you get the number 2. We're gonna do this a lot in class because what it has to do is become second nature to you. All right. When we do this square root key, you're gonna get 3 different types of answers. 3 different types of answers. Just look up here right now. You're gonna get 3 different types of answers. On your notes, I want you to circle rational, irrational, and imaginary. By the end of this class, we're gonna be playing with imaginary numbers. You're going, why do I want to play with imaginary numbers? Because your life is filled with what's called imaginary numbers, but they don't tell you that. I'm gonna show you how you guys have seen imaginary numbers every night if you go out and you see some lights going on. They're using imaginary numbers, even though the word imaginary means doesn't exist, but it does. All right, so every time you're gonna do one of these numbers with this division bar with a tail on it, the answer is either gonna be in this group, or this group. So we're gonna use our calculators and you're gonna see how you know which group your answer goes into. So with your calculators, I want you to do square root of 169. Now the square root key on your calculator, look up here, looks like this. It doesn't have a y to the x or an x to the y. Everybody's calculator has a square root key because we use that one so much. It has its own special keystroke. So do square root of 169, what does your machine say? 13. When it comes out to be a very nice, what I call clean answer, it has a beginning and it's got an end, that's called rational. Rational means, you know, it's all there, it's not wacky, it's a nice answer. That you can give me the beginning digit and you can give me the ending digit. Now I want you to try square root of 168 on your calculator. What's square root of 168? Oh, you're in a
Two
different
square
mode.
root,
Ooh, you're in
2
a
by the
different
square root of
mode,
42?
So be careful, huh?
2 by the square root of 42, did I say that right?
Okay, you're in a different mode too. So let's do square root of 167. Try that one. Both of these are irrational, but what does your calculator say?
Square root of 157. Yep, same here.
It just gives you the
Square root of
square root back.
167.
Okay, you guys all have your calculators in a mode that you probably took another class that put it in this mode. Anybody get an answer like 13 point something?
I got 12.
I can probably
9
convert it.
12 point something?
Yeah.
12 point something.
Okay, when your answer turns out to be 12 point blah, 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 a big long decimal number that fills up the whole screen, that means there is no number times itself going to give you 167. Those of you that are getting a calculator answer that's, what was yours again? What is it? Oh, 167. If it just gives you 167 back, or it gives you, 12 point blah, 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 or if it gives you, 3 times the square root of something, if it gives you something weird back that's not a nice clean answer, that's called an irrational answer. In other words, there's no number times itself going to give you 167. If I do 13 times 13, I do get 169. But 12 point blah, 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 blah is called an estimate. It's irrational. It's not going to give you the exact answer. Now I want you to try square root of 169, negative 169. What does your calculator say?
Negative that.
Pardon?
Undefined.
Not a real number?
Says undefined.
But I just got here.
Negative 13, I gotta change the.
Yeah.
13 with a little eyes, really,
Oh, you're in imaginary land. Okay, you're about 6 classes ahead of me, so your settings are wrong. So when you have a negative squared root, it should say not possible. Does any of your calculators say not possible or doesn't happen? Does yours say that? That's what it should say. Now, do you see what a mess I've got going on here? A lot of you have taken other courses, you've changed the settings, or somebody that had your calculator before you changed the settings. So you might want to just reset your calculator to the very basic beginning, and then it'll give you nice, clean answers. Now, I want you to try these 3 problems on your calculator and write what your calculator is saying for each one. Square root of 27, square root of 36, and square root of a negative 27. Okay, how many of you, your calculator says 5 point something? I love you guys. If your calculator says 5 point something, your settings are perfect. How many of you, your calculator says 9 times 3, 3 radical 3? Okay, your settings are wrong. So we've got to change your settings.
Oh, I reset it.
Okay, it still gave you that? Okay, we got to change your settings. Everybody's calculator should say 5 point blah, 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 blah. If it doesn't, you're gonna get the wrong answers for your homework today, because it's asking you, tell by looking at your machine whether the answer is rational, irrational, or not real. When you get an answer of 5 point and it fills the whole screen, That's called irrational. So this guy is irrational. Radical 36, what does your calculator say? 6, because it gives you a nice clean answer, we call that a rational answer. And then when you type in radical negative 27, your calculator should say error or imaginary or take you to imaginary land, and that is not, it's called not real. It's an imaginary answer. It is very real in your real life. If you're going into anything with electricity, you're going to be using imaginary numbers in your life. So imaginary numbers, I'll tell you how that got to be that name, but imaginary numbers are real numbers. Yeah.
I have a question. So 3 square root 3, could it be anything other than an irrational? It couldn't.
3, radical 3 is still an irrational number because it didn't leave the radical world.
Okay.
What you want to do is if it gives you a nice clean answer and you don't have any radical signs, then that's rational.
Mhm.
If it gives you, on your machine, if it gives you a radical answer back, this, or this one is 40 times 4, or 16 times 10. So this is 4 radical 10, is that what your machine says?
Mhm.
Aren't I good? Okay, when it gives you an answer back that still has a radical, then you have to say irrational answer. And when you have a square root of a negative number, you automatically say not real.
So technically I can still have that as the right answer then.
But you gotta know what that means.
Okay. Gotcha.
Hopefully by the end of the class you will.
I got it.
All right. We're gonna be dealing with cube roots, fourth roots, and fifth roots. Now, I want you to do at least one in each section. Don't do this one yet. Don't do that one. But do one in each section and make sure your calculator is giving you the answer I've displayed. Again, I'm doing this at the very beginning because everybody's got different machines. So you need to know how to do a cube root, a fourth root, and a fifth root. Just try a couple and get used to using your calculator and making sure that you get the answers that I have displayed. Try some with the negatives. Are we okay?
It wasn't a motor setting for me. It was the fact that I needed to not put the negative sign before the problem, but specifically up there before the radical. Otherwise, it acted like parentheses. Now I'm getting the answers you
Yeah,
want.
I got 4.
Okay, well, again, Casio's, I took a 2-week course in TI-83s from the manufacturer TI-83s way back in the 90s. And it took me one whole day, 8 hours a day, to learn how to turn it off and turn it on. So that's how slow I was, and I know this machine can be overwhelming. So that's why I'm just taking the time right now to practice with your machines. And if you don't have a TI-80, anything with the TI-80, I can't help you unless I read your directions. Yes, Angel? Okay. All right, now, I want you to put little stars by these 2 things down at the bottom. An even root are not, even roots of negative numbers are not real. Now, let me explain that. Look, this whole column are even indexes. Do you see that? 4 is an even number, 2, 4, 6, 8. We may never have a negative number underneath the radical sign of an even root. 2, 4, 6, 8, who do we appreciate? You can never have a negative number inside that radical house if the index outside is even, 2, 4, 6, 8. If the index is odd, then you can have a negative number underneath the radical sign, because I'm saying what 3 odd numbers multiplied together give me a negative 243. Do you understand the difference? So even indexes with a negative sign underneath today is bad. In a couple days it won't be. That's when we're gonna go to Peter Pan Land in Tinkerbell. You're gonna love it. All right, so everybody's okay with their calculator, or you're gonna stay after and we'll figure it out? Yeah.
I just have a question, so why is number 6 not a real number, but number 2 is? Because that's the just
Very good, because it's got an odd index. These guys are all odd indexes. And if you have an odd index of a negative number, you're okay. Because I'm asking for what 3 negative numbers multiplied together give me negative 27. And that's negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 does give me a negative 27. But if you have an even number of negatives, it'll always turn out to be a positive, so I can't have a negative answer. Okay? There's a lot of stuff today, so stay with me. All right. Now I'm going to go into something that most of you are going to hate me for a few minutes. And then we're going to figure it out on our calculator. Okay, this radical index, right, this radical sign here, can be written a different way. We could write it as a fraction. And the fraction is always 1 over whatever the index is. So now we're going to try this on our calculator. Do square root of 4 on your calculator. Just practice. Go find square root, put a 4 in. What does it say?
2.
Everybody 2?
Everybody did.
Easy, right? Now I want you to do 4 and then to an exponent of 1 over 2. Now stop before you start. When you're going to plug this in with your calculator, you put the big number down, and then most of you will do some kind of a caret, because that tells you you're going to do an exponent. But because now we have a fraction up there, we're going to put a parenthesis and then put a 1 divided by 2 and close the parenthesis. Try that on your calculator.
Divided by 2? Okay. Square 2?
It should say 2.
Right.
Mine said square root 2. Oh, I'll figure it out.
Okay. Look up here. If you don't put parentheses around your
I
fraction,
thought that was supposed to be under us.
if you don't put parentheses around the fraction, the calculator will only
Yes, no problem.
square the 1 and then divide everything by 2. So we have to have these parentheses around our fraction. Okay, try this one. Do 8 to the 1/3 power. Do 8 caret, parenthesis, 1 divided by 3, close the parenthesis, press enter.
2.
Should say 2. Anything you're not getting the answer by, put a star, because you don't want to leave here unless we get your calculators up to par. Okay, what am I telling you on this slide? Look, if I ask you, what's the answer for this problem, what do you say without your calculator?
6.
6. If I ask you, what's the answer to this problem without your calculator, what do you say?
6.
It's still 6. You were taught in 3rd grade or 4th grade, whenever they taught you multiplication, that you can use an X for multiply, or you can use parentheses around one, the other, or both, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Those were the same forms of the same problem. What one do I hit?
Undo.
Huh? You?
Undo.
Just
Edit
undo.
it and edit in the very top.
Edit, undo. Edit,
No,
do.
I think-
nope,
I
it's
think you
just
kinda
taking a
Try
step
try
away.
pressing the, yeah, and then,
Try-
yeah.
Yeah, twist it a little bit.
There you go.
Okay. Now, what we're doing here is writing the same math problem, one with a fraction, exponent, and one with that division bar with the tail on it. Both of them will give you the same answer. But now what I'm going to do on your quiz is I'm going to say, rewrite these fractional exponents using radicals.
Mm.
Now, your calculator isn't going to do that for you, your brain has to. So what you have to realize is that the index of the radicand is the denominator of the fraction. What did I just say? Do you see my denominator of the fraction? Okay, if I want to write it with a radical, I've got to put the 5 next to the tail of the division sign here and put the 32 inside. These two are exactly the same math problems. One is writing it in rational exponents. Rational means it's a fraction. And one is writing it with radical symbols. Both of them will give you the answer of 2. Okay, write each of these with radicals. And then simplify using your calculator or your brain. But you gotta write it with radicals first. So if you don't have a calculator, the first part you can do. Okay, so the first one here, letter B, I put my division bar with the tail on it, so it's a radical. I put the radicand 64 inside, and I don't put the 2 inside the little tail part, because it's an assumed 2. When I use my calculator or brain, I can do it, type in either of these, and they're both going to give me the answer of 8. All right, now I want you to pay attention. What did you write for this one here? Where did you put the negative sign? Inside or outside?
Inside.
Oh,
Mhm.
inside, outside, you can't have both answers. You gotta pay attention.
Well, it's not
See,
a
I'm
number.
making you pay attention to details. This says not negative 81 to the 1/4 power. This says opposite of 81 to the 4th power. Look, this guy is negative 81 to the 1/4 power. See the difference? When there's no parenthesis around the negative and the number, When you write it in radical form, the negative goes outside. Circle that. It's very important if you didn't write your problem that way. This is wanting the negative number that you used 4 times to get a positive 81. And then take the opposite of that answer. This one down here, if I write it in radical form, because I put that negative sign around the 81 and the parentheses are around that, both of them, it means that this is your radicand. It goes inside, and I have it to the 4th power. And 4 is an even number. Can I have a negative number underneath the radical?
No.
Get an answer. No. Today, you have to say that the answer is not real. Yes.
So just making sure if the negative is not in the parentheses, then we'll put the negative outside.
Yes.
Okay.
If the negative is in the parenthesis, this whole blob has to be underneath your radical house. Write yourself some really good notes on this, because again, this is just getting used to having some very new terminology and new things happening with your calculator. Now, if we look at problem number E over here, I'm going to have an index of a 3, so I can have a negative number inside the radical house. Think of the index as the address on your house. Can you think of that?
Mm.
So if you think of this whole symbol here as a little house, and outside is the address. If your address is even, you can't have any negative things inside your house. If the address is odd, you can have negative things inside your radical house. You gotta get that in your brain right here. So with your calculators, try doing the cube root of a negative 64 and see if your calculators say -4. Try it. The more you practice it, you gotta practice this 7 times in order to get good at these radicals. Otherwise, you're gonna get home, do the homework, and you're gonna get every answer wrong and just copy the answers in the back, and you're not gonna know your keystroking when you go to take your quizzes and exams. Okay, do you get -4? Everybody? If you don't, when I'm saying this, put a star by it and you don't leave this room unless you get some help from either your new friends that you're sitting by, or you and I'll play with your machine till we figure it out. All right, now we've got to practice this guy. Watch. And you see how I put parentheses around that whole fraction, the numerator and the denominator? When you go and write it in radical form, it's like a big 2-story house. Do you see the 2 stories inside your house? You no longer have a 1-story house, we have a 2-story house. It's very important, because the next lesson, on Wednesday, we're gonna do something with these 2-story houses, like blow them up. But for today, if it says write it using a radical, means you have to have a numerator and a denominator under one big radical house. And again, you gotta give me the index. It's very important. If the index isn't a 2, you gotta write a 3 out there. Now I want you to try this radical on your calculator and tell me what your calculator says. Is it gonna say point repeating 3s or 1/3?
1/3.
Point and 3s.
If it says point repeating 3s, because I gave you the problem in fraction land, you gotta convert it back to a fraction. So either use your math key or your
It's simple.
whatever to get it to say 1/3. Does everybody's
Okay.
calculator say 1/3?
I'll use something real quick
Yes,
before I
back
forget.
row? Okay. I'm being real picky today because we've gotta get this straight with your machine before I can start doing, I haven't even started radical rules. Okay. Next part, we're gonna get a little bit harder with our rational exponents. What's a rational exponent? Look up here. Do you see this little fraction up here? The base is 8, and the exponent is 2/3, not a 1/3. It's got a numerator that's not a 1. How do I write that using a radical? I put the 8 underneath. I put the denominator is always your index of the radical. And then I put a little squared outside the whole radical house. I want you to try this on your machine and tell me what it says.
4?
This,
Oh, okay.
cube root of 8, then caret 2. Does it say 4? Okay, if it says 4, you're doing the right keystroking. Anything else? Put a star by it, and you're gonna ask because your calculator's doing different keystroking. Okay, I want you to write these 3 math problems in radical form with your new best friends that you're sitting next to.
Yeah, 4.
4.
I think I just did the same thing.
Write it in radical form and then use your calculator to give you the answer. Write it in radical form and then use your calculator to give me the answer. Now, if you don't know your new best friend that you're sitting next to, I want at the top of your packet to write their name. If you don't know their name, just say, "Hi, I'm Joe Schmo, what's your name?" Go.
Where is that? One's below the black line.
You're gonna have quizzes working with these new partners. You need to find out their name, you need to find out what their brain's thinking to see if you like what their brain's thinking, or man, I'm not writing down what they're saying. You gotta work with these people, and we're gonna have some group quizzes in the next couple of weeks, and so you're gonna be working with them, so you wanna start developing a little bit of relationship, like, "Hi, Bob, nice to see you today." You gotta figure out their name first, okay? All right, radical form. When it's a denominator of a 2, you don't have to put the index in, but notice again, my 3 is outside the radical, so I have to do the square root of 25 first, that's 5, and then do 5 to the 3rd power, that's 5 times 5 times 5, or 125, your calculator should say. You see the difference between these two now? It's real important that when you do your homework, that when it says write it in radical form and you see a little slash in front of the digit, or in front of the variable, you wanna pay attention to see if it's got parentheses that's including anything or not. If there is no parenthesis, that negative sign has to stay outside your house. You don't bring in something negative unless it's got a scarf around it, it's including the digit and the negative sign. When it has parentheses around it, then I need to include the negative inside the house. Now, when you try this on your calculator, do this one on your calculator. Put in a negative sign, radical, 16, close the 16 and cube it, what do you get?
-64.
Negative 64. And this guy, when you try it, what does your calculator say?
Not real.
Says not real, imaginary land. It might have an I there if your calculator is real advanced. I stands for imaginary, it means it doesn't exist with our number system. But it should say something about not real or not possible. Mhm.
What did you put, like, the parentheses
Oh, I didn't
and
put the negative in.
like, say for A, 25 and the square root and the parentheses, and then outside of it, put the exponent. That's a little,
What is your calculator telling you?
uh,
It still should be 125.
yeah.
Yeah, that's good. What we're doing is testing your calculator and your keystroking. That's why I sent you an email yesterday. I said, don't forget your calculators, because you gotta practice the keystroking. Because if you just go home, don't do anything for 24 hours and start doing your homework tomorrow night, you're gonna get your keystroking all messed up again, and then you're gonna get wrong answers on the quiz. It's real important. If you don't have your machines with you, you got an extra hour worth of work going through the lesson to see matching if you can do the keystroking. Just copying the answer onto your homework, you learn how to copy an answer, but you gotta do the keystroking, otherwise you won't do well on your quizzes and exams. Okay, let's keep going. Do you guys remember the 8 rules of exponents? Tell me yes. Let's everybody say yes.
Yes.
Yes. No. Okay, do you guys remember what a negative exponent means?
You put it over 1.
It's a fraction. It means if you have a negative exponent, instead of at the numerator, you gotta put it in the denominator. If you have a negative exponent in the denominator, you gotta move it to the numerator. This was lesson 6 of our class that we had a long time ago, in January, February. So if I give you a negative rational exponent, rational means it's a fraction, but it's negative, you've got to write this on your paper. Now, try this math problem with your calculator and see what it says. I'm trying to teach you whether you can pick up your calculator or you don't, or what you're going to pick up your calculator and do.
Is this,
What does it say? Do you have a fraction answer? Or do you have 1/27, or do you have point blah, 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 blah? Huh? Oh, you get both? Nice.
I have to remember.
Yeah, yeah. Because this is really a fraction, you have to give me an answer of 1/27. If you give me point blah, 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 whatever that decimal number is, I'm gonna take off points.
I'm trying to figure out what to do.
Now, watch, how do you get a fraction answer without having to go through all that? First thing you have to do is recognize when we have a negative exponent, we gotta flip it. Everybody okay with that one? Yes? Yes?
Crash.
Okay, so notice I just put my 81 to the 3/4 power on the bottom. Now, If you do just this on your calculator, instead of doing the fraction, what does it say? Should say 27.
I try that way.
Try it. Does it say 27? You gotta tell me, yes or no. If you do 81 caret 3 divided by 4, press enter, it should say 27. Does your calculator
Yes.
say that?
Yes.
Okay, so when you get a problem like this, you don't wanna put this whole box into your calculator, because it's gonna give you a decimal answer, some of you. What you wanna do is just take care of the radical, and it should say do this, and it should come out as a 27 on your sheet. Now, what happens if I give you a fraction to a negative exponent? Yeah, yeah, you flip the fraction, so you don't have a negative exponent. Easy peasy.
Not right away.
Now, what did we do in week 6? Remember in week 6, we gave each of the numerators and the denominator, we wanted to get rid of the parenthesis house, do you guys remember that? Okay, so 25, oh, they're gonna do it different. So 25 has to have a rational exponent, and 64 has to have a rational exponent. The other way you can do it, is to put it in radical form, is to take your fraction, 25 over 64, and again, denominator is the index, the numerator is your exponent after it. Now, try this on your calculator and see if you can give me an answer that's in fraction form. Square root of 25 divided by 64. Make sure you put that in parentheses and then cube it. What'd you get?
125 over 512.
You want to try this on your calculator, but when you have a radical, does your calculator give you a left parenthesis? Most of them do. And you got to close the parenthesis before you do your caret 3. Did you get it? Watch. Look up here. You're going to do square root. So do your square root key.
Oh, did give me a fraction.
Then what they do is they usually give you a parenthesis on the left. Does your calculator give you a left parenthesis for inside? Yes or no? Nobody's does?
Yeah.
Mine
Oh.
does, but if you don't talk to me, I don't know. Do they give you a left parenthesis? If they don't, you gotta put in your own parenthesis. Then do 25, do the divide key, 64, close the parenthesis, then caret 3. Try that. See if your calculator will say 125 over 512. If it doesn't and it gives you a decimal answer, you gotta convert it to a fraction. Did yours work? Try it. You didn't put in 125, so you gotta watch your digits as you type. And put in parentheses. Where's your parentheses keys? Oh, good, okay, you gotta put your parentheses keys in. Around the 25 divided by 64. Could you have taken square root of 25 and said that's 5, square root of 64 is 8? Not even used your calculator? Yeah, I would have. Okay, questions? Okay, let's go to the next one. It's very important you read the directions. It says write each exponential as a radical. So write the first one as a radical using the division bar with the tail. No calculators, this is just brain. I don't want an answer. It doesn't say as an answer, it just says write it as a radical. So your calculator's not gonna help you. Those of you that don't have your calculators, you can do this section. It doesn't ask for an answer, it just says rewrite using a radical. Okay, now watch, look. Number 2. Says rewrite using radicals. Do you see the red 14? Everybody say yes or no. Can't hear you.
Yes.
Okay, you see the 14. The only thing that has an exponent is Mr. X, the black X. 14 isn't part of that exponent. Do you see that? It doesn't have parentheses around the 14 and the X. It's just Mr. X. You see that? So what you want to do on your notes is either highlight that 14, or if you don't have a highlighter, underline and put an arrow that Mr. X is the only thing that has an exponent. Mr. 14 doesn't. So when I go and write this, I'm going to put the 14 out in front. And then I'm going to have a cube root of x squared. I'm going to put the cube is the index, the square is after I do the radical, and the 14 has nothing to do with that radical, nothing. Now let's try the next one. They want me to write it with radicals. So look again, do you see the red 5? It has nothing to do with that x to the 3/5 power, the black x to the 3/5 power. That is separate from Mr. Red 5. So write that using a radical. So Mr. 5 is totally outside by itself. And then I'm going to convert the x, it has an index of 5 and a cube of 3. So that's the way we write it. Now the next one, do you see how I put parentheses around the whole green 2 and x? That means the green 2x has to all be inside the radical house. And then I'm going to do the 5th root of 2x to the 3rd. Okay, on the right-hand side with your new best friend, whoever's tallest in your group of 2. Why do I pick on the tall people? I don't know, see? Whoever's tallest needs to do all 3 answers. Discuss with your new partner. Tell them what the 3 answers are.
On the right side?
Yeah. Talk to your new partner. Hey, Z? What did, your answer, are you taller than me? What did you get for number 4, 5, and 6? It says write as
head.
exponential problem. Whoever is tallest.
Oh, 47, that's for 49, yeah. Yeah. Those are easy to just put in there, but this side. Ready to take a break and then start practicing this more, so I was able to do it for this side for the 5X, 3 by 5 that I felt print out for.
Notice,
In parentheses,
for
maybe
each
forget
of
about the
these,
first
I'm
one.
not using my calculator, I'm using my knowledge of how to change a radical into a rational exponent. Okay, there's a 1 out here, even though you don't see it. So my rational exponent here, fraction, is 1 over the index, always. This guy here is 8, the exponent over the index 4. 8 divided by 4, you can use your calculator or brain and get 2. And so this is 9 to the 2, or it says simplify, so if it's a number squared, you have to use your brain or your calculator to give me the digit. Okay, this one has an 8 on the outside, and 8 as an index. 8 divided by 8 is 1, so it's just z or z to the 1.
Simplify.
It says write as a radical, write as an exponent. You're not using your calculators when you do this piece. You're using your brain and your knowledge that the index is always the denominator. If there's an exponent, it's the numerator. If you don't see an exponent, it's always a 1. Okay. Next slide. Look up top. Those are your 8 rules of exponents we went over on day 6. Some of you were here, maybe some of you weren't, maybe some of you were absent. But when you have like bases, you add your exponents. When you have a parenthesis house, remember that? We talked about the parenthesis house with the guy outside. You multiply. When you have a negative exponent, that's a bully, we gotta get rid of it, and it goes to either the denominator or the numerator, and you drop the negative sign. Do you remember these rules? If not, you gotta review them. But now this is getting you ready for the 151 class or the 142 class, whatever class you're gonna take after this. These are the kind of problems you're gonna have. They're gonna say, simplify each expression, write with only positive exponents. It means I don't want radical answers, I want fractional answers. And so you need to look and say, oh, I got a base to an exponent, base to an exponent. Pick up your calculator. You've got to add a half plus a third. Try it on your calculator. Do 1 over 2 plus 1 over 3. What does it say? Don't come without your calculators. Trust me, you do not want to do this anymore. It should say 5, 6. If your calculator says 5, 6, hey, you're going to be fine with your homework.
See how this goes.
If it says 0.8 repeating 3s, what are you
Well,
going to have to do?
It looks pretty wrong.
Change it to a,
Okay,
Fraction.
well, you're in a different mode than I am.
all right? Everybody okay with that one? Okay, this one, what do we have to do when we're
No, just do
dividing
it in the
like
matrix form.
bases with fractional exponents? What's your math problem going to be? what are we gonna have to do? Subtract them. So with your calculator, try it, do 2/3 minus 4/3. Because when we're dividing, look up here, here's your rule. When you're dividing, you gotta subtract the exponents. That's where we said, where do you have more of? But now with fractions, you can't tell where you have more of, so it's always the top number minus the bottom number. Try it with your calculator. It should come out as negative 2/3, or negative point repeating sixes, and you gotta convert it to a fraction. You gotta talk to me, I'm seeing blank faces. Is your calculator saying negative 2/3? If it doesn't, put a star by this in your notes, and you don't leave class today until you figure out how to get negative 2/3.
All right.
Now, because I have a negative exponent, what do I have to do for my final step?
Put it over 1.
Put it over 1, or if it's in the numerator, you put it to the denominator. If it's in the denominator, you put it to the numerator. Okay, do you remember this one? This one was where we have parenthesis house, remember that? And we got a guy outside. That's this guy here, where everybody inside the parenthesis house has to get a multiply of 6. So you have to do 1/3 times 6. If you don't know how to do it in your head, you gotta use your calculator to figure out what power of A you're going to have. Or you can just do 6 times 1 is 6 divided by 3. Do 6 times 2 divided by 3. Don't forget to do the B, it's a 6. And then you go clean up each of your fraction answers. Are we okay so far? What happens if we have parenthesis house to a negative exponent? It's real hard to flip everything upside down, so if you have a whole bunch of people living inside your parenthesis house, I just give the neg-half to everybody inside. So I give the neg-half to the a to the 3rd, I give the neg-half to the b to the -4th. It's on your notes, so you don't have to copy all this down. Now you've got to clean up and multiply these guys together. Get a to the -3 2's. Get b to the +2. Get a to the +1. B to the -1/10. And then you just flip them up and down. If they have a negative exponent, you can't keep them with a negative exponent. Now, there are some people in this room that hate fractions. Raise your hand if you hate fractions. This is your lesson from hell. It's just nasty. You gotta have your calculator be your best friend. Or if you know how to multiply the numerators together, put it over the denominator, multiply neg-4 times neg-1 divided by 2, and you can do this in your head, that's fine. But you've got to know how to play with fractions in order to do today's lesson. Or use your machine, and if you don't, you gotta scream and yell. Okay, here's your final answer. You have to get rid of all your negative exponents. So a to the -3 2's goes down to the bottom, b to the 2 stays up there, b to the -1/10 goes up above, and a to the 1 goes down below. Now you gotta add these together. 1 plus 3 2's. Try it on your calculator, what does it say? probably gonna say 1.5. Does it say 1.5? Huh? What does your calculator say? If it says 5/2, great, your keystroking is correct. If it says 2.5, you've got to convert that to a fraction, so you got to change that decimal to an improper. Yeah,
Was that first page? The exponent?
this one right here,
The bottom.
oh, the bottom one here. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, what's the hardest problem you're gonna have? Where I'm gonna give you a variable with a rational exponent times a binomial. Oh my gosh. This is getting you ready for the 152. If you wanna go to the 152, you gotta be able to play with fractions, either with your brain or with your calculator. You need to know that when you're multiplying r to the 2/5 times r to the 3/5, when you have like bases, you add those exponents. Add the exponents, you're not multiplying the exponents. Because that's this first rule. This lesson is assuming you know all 8 of these rules. If you don't, and when you start doing your homework, yeah, you can sit and go copy the answers down. I've seen it a lot this semester, where you're just plopping in the answers that I give you at the back. I'm not stupid. But if you get 5 points for homework and you get 0 out of 10 on the quiz, you still got enough in the class. You wasted a lot of lead copying my answers. I give you the answers for you to check your work, and if you get it wrong, you gotta either ask or send me an email and say, what am I doing wrong? Okay, last slide. 4 things you have to remember for your final answer. You wanna highlight these. No parentheses in a final answer. No powers are raised to powers, and each base occurs only once, and no negative or 0 exponents appear. Guess what? This slide is identical to what I gave you on day 6, this piece. What's changed on day 21 is that my examples are harder. On day 6, I gave you x to the 6th over x to the 3, and I said, this is wrong because you repeated the base twice. And you had to say, where's there more x's? Well, now you got the x's written more than once, but you need to know that you have to subtract those, and that's what I showed you on your work here. I didn't hide anything from you. I just wanted you to see what your work should look like. So when you do your homework, and you're just copying the answers from the back of the homework because you think I'm stupid and I gave you the answers, I don't care that you have the answers. On an exam, I'd love to give you the answers. They won't let me. But on an exam, I could give you the answers too. But if you don't show me the steps and you don't know how to get to those answers, you're still at an F level. So on your homework, I'm going to be grading it very strict if I don't see the work like I'm modeling for you here. Okay, take out your practice quiz real quick.
I didn't get it.
Oh. Look at your partner's practice quiz.
Is it still in the yellow packet?
Yellow
Yeah.
packet. Number 1, there's no work to show. It just says is it a real number or not? So you need to know what is definition of a real. Well, I got a negative inside there, but what's my index? Is it even or is it odd? It's odd, so I can have a negative inside the house is good if you got an odd address. So is there any work for number one? No, but it says find the root. So now you gotta try that on your calculator. And if you don't have your calculator today in class, you definitely wanna try that on your calculator and see if you get the answer that's over there. Number two says, is it rational, irrational, or not real? You want to try this on your calculator, see what the answer is, and then and then it says round to the nearest thousand. So you need to know how to do that on your calculator. If you don't know how to play on your machine, you gotta go and learn how to do these keystroking if you don't bring your calculator to class. Number three, simplify by using rational exponents. So I got a negative exponent. Do you know how to do that? How hard is that? Look at what my answer looks like. You should be able to do that on your calculator and come up with 1 over 1,024. If not, you guys email me or talk to somebody. It's so important that you do the practice quiz. I still have 2 people in this room that got 100 on everything I've given them. And I'll bet you any amount of money if I ask them what they're doing the practice quizzes, they're doing the homework, and they're making sure that they understand everything. If you want an A in the class, you gotta put forth as much effort as I'm putting forth with the lesson. And you can't just write any answers for the homework. You gotta do the work, okay? Okay, bring your